when we got back from that picnic. Nothing dramatic happened. No slammed doors, no yelling. The house just settled into itself like any other Sunday night. Theo climbed onto his chair, pulled his drawing closer, and started erasing something. At first, I thought he messed up the dinosaur. He does that a lot, changes his mind halfway through. But then I realized what he was erasing. It was himself. He rubbed until the paper thinned, until that little space where he'd been was just a pale smudge. Then he looked at me and said, almost like he was helping me understand something, "It's okay. I don't think I'm supposed to be there." I didn't connect that moment to my mother right away. I wish I could tell you I did, that something clicked instantly and I saw everything clearly. But that's not how it works when you've lived inside something for a long time. You don't see patterns, you see moments, and you explain them away. My mom has never been the kind of person people would call mean. If you met her at church or at the grocery store, you'd probably say she's polite, thoughtful, even. She smiles when she talks. She remembers people's birthdays. She brings a dish to every gathering. But if you've ever had someone compliment you in a way that made you feel smaller, you know what I mean. She'd look at something you were proud of and tilt her head just slightly, like she was adjusting the picture, and say, "Oh, that's nice. I wouldn't have thought to do it that way," and there was nothing technically wrong with it, nothing you could point to and say, "That was rude," so you just sat with it. Growing up, I learned pretty quickly that the easiest version of life was the one where I didn't push back. I kept things smooth. I said yes before she had to ask. I fixed things before they became problems. And over time, that just became who I was. If my parents were short on money, I'd send something over, not because anyone demanded it out loud. It was always softer than that. A comment here, a sigh there, a story about a bill that came at the wrong time. You learn to hear what's not being said, and I was good at it. Too good. Maybe. There was this one winter a couple years ago when their furnace went out. It was freezing, like the kind of cold that makes your house feel hollow. My dad mentioned it in passing, like it wasn't a big deal. And my mom said, "We'll figure something out." I transferred the money that same night. No one asked me to. No one thanked me in a way that stuck, either. It just became expected. The one time I needed something back, it didn't land the same way. Marlo had a volleyball tournament in Columbus. It was a big one for her, and I asked my mom if she could keep Theo for the weekend. He's easy. He goes to bed on time. He eats whatever you give him. He mostly just wants someone to watch dinosaurs with him. She said she was too tired. I said okay. I meant it. I didn't argue. Then that Saturday, I saw photos online. Her and 6 friends around a card table. Snacks laid out like it was a party. 3 different dips in matching bowls. Too tired for him. I told myself it didn't mean anything, that adults get to choose how they spend their energy. But standing in my kitchen, watching my son erase himself out of a picture, I realized something I hadn't let myself say out loud before. It wasn't just that my mom didn't show up. It was that I had spent years making it easy for her not to. If you had shown up at that picnic an hour early, before anyone sat down to eat, you wouldn't have seen anything wrong. It was one of those Midwest summer days that feels almost staged, bright, but not too hot. The kind of light that makes everything look a little softer than it actually is. Kids running in loose circles on the grass. Someone messing with a portable speaker, trying to get the volume just right. Burgers already on the grill. That steady smell of charcoal drifting through the park. Theo fit right into it. He was chasing a couple of older boys, laughing too loud, tripping over his own feet and popping right back up like nothing happened. At one point, he stopped to show a girl his dinosaur toy, explaining something very serious about how this one could definitely win a fight if it had to. Marlo stayed close, not hovering, just aware. You could see it in the way her eyes followed him, even when she was talking to someone else. My mom was already there when we arrived, sitting in one of those folding chairs, sunglasses on, legs crossed like she had claimed her spot hours ago. She smiled when she saw us, stood up, gave Marlo a quick hug, gave me one too. With Theo, It was different, not cold exactly, just brief. A hand on his shoulder. A quick, "Hi, sweetheart." And then she was already turning back to whoever she'd been talking to. I noticed it, but I didn't stay on it. That's the thing about days like that. They give you enough good moments to balance out the small ones you don't want to look at too closely. Theo shared his juice box with a kid he didn't know, helped pick up a ball that rolled too far, came running over once just to tell me, out of breath, that this was the best picnic ever. And for a couple of hours, I let myself believe him. I sat there, paper plate in my lap, watching my kids exist in a space that was supposed to be family, telling myself everything was fine. It almost felt normal. It didn't happen all at once. That's the part I keep replaying. There wasn't a single, clear break where the day turned. It was more like something slowly tightening, and I didn't notice how tense everything had gotten until it snapped. Theo had been running back and forth between the table and the grass. That in-between space kids live in when they're not ready to sit still, but don't want to miss anything either. At one point, he brushed past the edge of the table and knocked over a plastic cup. Lemonade spilled into the dirt, disappeared almost instantly. No one got wet. No one even had to stand up. I grabbed a napkin out of habit, wiped what little I could. Told him, "Hey, watch your step, buddy." He nodded, already halfway back to whatever game he'd been in. That should have been it. But my mom let out this long breath. The kind that doesn't sound loud but somehow lands across the whole table. She didn't look at Theo. She looked at me. "This is exactly what I mean," she said. I remember pausing, napkin still in my hand. "What do you mean?" She gave that small smile. The one that always makes it sound like she's being reasonable. It's just a lot. For everyone. No one said anything. I felt it then. That familiar shift where something uncomfortable enters the room and everybody silently agrees not to touch it. Plates clinked a little louder. Someone laughed at something that wasn't that funny. Theo had climbed onto the bench next to Marlowe by then, swinging his legs, talking with his mouth half full, completely unaware of the way the air had changed. We started eating. Conversations picked back up in fragments, like nothing had happened, and for a few minutes, I almost let myself fall back into it, the way I always had. Then my mom set her fork down, not hard, just deliberately. She looked across the table at me, not raising her voice, not trying to get attention. She didn't need to. "Karen," she said, "next time. Maybe just don't bring him. It would be easier for everyone." It didn't echo, it didn't explode. It just sat there. My first instinct wasn't anger. It was that automatic reflex I'd built over years. Smooth it over, make it smaller, turn it into something that could pass. I opened my mouth, already reaching for something polite. Theo heard it. He stopped mid-swing, legs going still under the table. He looked at me, not at her, just at me. Like I was the one who would explain what that meant. And that was the moment I felt it shift inside me. Not because of what she said, but because of what nobody did. My dad didn't say. That's not fair. He took a sip of his drink and looked past us, like something more interesting had just appeared in the distance. My aunt stared down at her plate like she'd dropped something important in it. My uncle suddenly found his food fascinating. 20-something adults at that table, people who had watched me grow up, who had held my babies when they were small. And not one of them said, "Hey, that's a 6-year-old you're talking about." Marlowe didn't stand up. She didn't make a scene. She just shifted closer to Theo, pulled his plate a little nearer to him, and said quietly, "You're fine." And somehow, that was the loudest thing anyone did. I sat there, feeling that old pull, the one that tells you to absorb it, to protect the room instead of yourself, for a second. I almost did. Then I looked at Theo's face again, waiting for me to decide what this moment meant, and I realized if I stayed, I was deciding it for him. I thought leaving early would fix it. That if I got the kids in the car, drove home, put some distance between us and that table, It would all shrink back down into something manageable, something I could file away like I always did. But it didn't stay there. It came home with us. The ride back was quiet, but not in a peaceful way. Theo sat behind me, holding his dinosaur in one hand, resting his forehead against the window. Every once in a while, I'd catch his reflection in the rearview mirror, watching the road slide by like he was trying to understand something. Marlo didn't say much either. She just kept her arms stretched across the back seat, her fingers resting lightly on Theo's shoulder, like she was keeping him anchored. When we pulled into the driveway, I turned off the engine and didn't move. You know that feeling, when you need a few extra minutes before stepping into your own house because something inside you hasn't settled yet. The crickets were loud, louder than usual. Or maybe I just needed something to fill the space. Theo got out first, ran inside like he always does, straight to the living room, dropping his shoes wherever they landed. For a second, I let myself think maybe it had already passed for him. Kids are like that, right? They bounce back. But later that night, I started noticing the small things. He didn't ask to call my parents the way he usually did on Sundays. He didn't line up his dinosaurs to show Grandma over FaceTime. At dinner, when Marlo was talking about something from practice, Theo stayed quiet, just pushing his food around his plate in slow circles. Nothing dramatic, nothing you could point to and say, "That's it. That's the problem. Just less. Less of him." The next morning, I found his drawing on the kitchen table again, the one from the night before. The spot where he'd erased himself had dried into this thin, worn patch, like the paper had been rubbed too many times in the same place. I ran my finger over it without thinking. It felt different, softer, weaker. That's when he walked in, still in his pajamas, hair sticking up in every direction. He climbed onto the chair next to me, looked at the picture, and then looked at me. "I can draw another one," he said, "a better one." I nodded, because I didn't trust my voice yet. He picked up a marker, hesitated for a second, then asked, "Should I put me in it this time?" He didn't ask it like a joke. He asked it like he was checking the rules, and something in me just dropped, because that wasn't about a picture anymore. That was about whether he believed he belonged. I told him, "Yeah, buddy, you're in it. You're always in it." He nodded like that made sense, like that was enough, and started drawing again, but I sat there a little longer after he ran off, staring at that worn spot on the paper, realizing how fast something small can get inside a kid and start rewriting things. Later that week, I caught myself doing something I hadn't noticed before. Every time my phone lit up with my mom's name, my shoulders would tense before I even picked it up. Not because I was expecting a fight, because I already knew the shape of the conversation. A problem. A pause. A space for me to step in. And for the first time, I didn't reach for that space right away. I just let it sit there. The first thing I did differently didn't look like much from the outside. There was no speech, no moment where I decided, "That's it, I'm done," and slammed a door behind it. It was smaller than that. Quieter. It was a phone call. My mom called on a Tuesday afternoon while I was in between patients, sitting in my car with the engine off, eating half a sandwich I didn't really taste. Her name lit up on the screen, and I felt that same tightening in my shoulders before I even answered. I already knew the rhythm. She didn't mention the picnic, not a word about it. Instead, she started talking about the water heater making a strange noise, how your father thinks it might go out soon, how expensive those things are these days. And then she paused. It was always that pause, that little pocket of silence where I was supposed to step in and say, "I'll take care of it." I sat there with the phone pressed to my ear, staring at the steering wheel, noticing how quiet the car felt. For a second, I almost filled the space the way I always did. "Almost. Instead," I said, "that sounds frustrating. Have you had someone come look at it yet?" There was a beat on the other end, not long, but different. She cleared her throat. "No, we haven't. We're just trying to figure things out." "Maybe start with that," I said. "Get an estimate. See what you're dealing with." Another pause. I could feel it then. That subtle shift, Not anger yet. Confusion, like she was waiting for me to circle back, to land where I always landed. I didn't. We talked for another minute or two, about nothing important, and then the call ended without anything being solved. Or maybe it solved something I hadn't meant to. I sat there a little longer after, sandwich still in my hand, realizing my heart was beating faster than it should have been for a conversation that calm. It didn't feel like victory. It felt unfamiliar, like I had stepped slightly out of a role I'd been playing for so long. I didn't quite know where to put my hands without it, and the strangest part was, nothing dramatic happened. The world didn't shift. My mom didn't yell, but something had moved, just enough that I knew I wouldn't be able to slide all the way back into the old version of things, even if I tried. At first, it didn't feel like pushback. It felt like repetition, like the same conversation coming back around, just wearing a different outfit. 2 days after the water heater call, my mom reached out again. This time it was about the electric bill, higher than expected. Summer heat, air conditioning running more than usual. Same tone, same pacing, same pause. I was at home that time, standing at the kitchen counter, rinsing dishes while Theo sat on the floor nearby, lining up his dinosaurs in a careful row. Marlo was at the table with her headphones on, pretending not to listen in the way teenagers do when they're listening to everything. "I just don't know what we're going to do," my mom said. The water ran over my hands. Steady, almost too loud for a second. I turned it down. "Well," I said, "have you talked to the electric company? Sometimes they can set up a payment plan." Silence. Not the familiar one this time. Not the one that invited me in. This one just hung there. "Oh," she said finally. "I suppose we could try that. We could try that." Like it hadn't been an option until I didn't offer the other one. After we hung up, I dried my hands slowly, one plate at a time. Even though they were already clean, I could feel something building. Not explosive, just pressure. And then it started coming from other directions. My aunt called a few days later. Left a voicemail long enough that I had to sit down to listen to it all. She talked about how hard things had been for my parents, how family is supposed to show up for each other, how she didn't raise me, but if she had, I'd understand that better. I replayed that message once, then deleted it. Not out of anger, just because I didn't need to carry it. A day after that, a number I barely recognized popped up, one of my mom's friends. I'd met her maybe a handful of times over the years. She spoke gently, like she was offering concern. "I just think you should really think about what kind of example you're setting for your children," she said. I leaned against the counter, looking out the window at the backyard, where Theo had moved his dinosaurs onto the grass, narrating some kind of battle in a quiet voice. "I am," I said. "That's exactly what I'm doing." There was a pause, like she wasn't expecting that answer. We didn't talk much longer after that. The thing about all of it was, no one came at me directly. Not really. No one said, "You're wrong for what you're doing." They just kept circling the same idea from different angles, that I was responsible, that I should step in, that things would go back to normal if I just did what I'd always done. And I understood it. I really did. Because for a long time, that's exactly how it worked. But now, every time I felt that pull, I saw Theo at the table, erasing himself out of that picture. And suddenly, normal didn't feel like something I was trying to get back to. It felt like the thing I was finally stepping away from. I wasn't expecting my dad to be the one who showed up. If anything, I thought he'd stay where he always had been, somewhere just outside the conflict. Close enough to hear it, far enough to not get pulled in. It was a Saturday morning when he knocked on my door. I almost didn't answer right away. Not because I didn't want to see him, but because I didn't know which version of him would be standing there. The one who kept things light, or the one who pretended not to notice anything at all. When I opened the door, he was holding a paper bag from the bakery down the street, the same place he used to take me when I was little. Cinnamon rolls. He stepped inside like he wasn't sure he was allowed to. We sat at the kitchen table, the bag between us, neither of us reaching for it. He took off his hat, turned it in his hands a couple times, then set it down. "I saw the messages," he said. "That was it. No build-up." I nodded. He looked at the table when he spoke next. "That shouldn't have happened. Not to Marlo, not to Theo." His voice didn't shake. That almost made it harder to hear. I waited for the part where he softened it, explained it, redirected it back to keeping the peace. It didn't come. "I should have said something that day," he added, still not looking at me. "At the picnic." I leaned back in my chair a little, trying to understand what I was hearing. He let out a breath. Slow, like he'd been holding it for a long time. "I've been quiet for a lot of years," he said. "Thought that was how you kept a family together." He finally looked up then. I think I was wrong. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, but it shifted something. Because for the first time, it didn't feel like I was the only one standing in a different place. Nothing got fixed right after that conversation. That's the part people don't always talk about. You expect a moment like that to turn into something calls made. Apologies lined up, things moving back into place. It didn't. Days went by. Then another week. My mom didn't reach out. Not to me, not to the kids. The silence felt different this time. Heavier. Like it wasn't being used to pull me back in. Just there. And I let it stay. That was new. I didn't try to fill it. I didn't send a message to smooth things over or check if she was okay. I didn't ask my dad what was happening on their end. I focused on what was in front of me. Marlo had practice 3 nights that week, and I sat in the bleachers longer than I needed to, just watching her move across the court, loud and sure of herself in a way I didn't remember being at her age. Theo started bringing his drawings home from school again. Full ones this time, everyone in them, sometimes even adding extra people we don't know, just to make the page feel busy. One night, he handed me a picture before bed and said, "I made sure there was space for everybody." I told him it looked perfect, and I meant it. There were moments where I'd reach for my phone out of habit, thinking I should say something, do something, put things back the way they were, but every time that thought came up, I paused long enough to ask myself one question. Back to what? And I didn't have an answer that felt right anymore, so I stopped trying to rush things into being comfortable again. I let them stay uncomfortable. Things didn't go back to how they were, not with my mom, not with the rest of the family, and honestly, not with me. We still talk now, carefully. On better days, it almost feels normal. On others, you can hear the distance sitting between every word, but something changed that I don't think will change back. Theo doesn't erase himself from his drawings anymore. Marlo doesn't hesitate when something feels wrong. And me, I don't rush to make things easier for everyone else at the cost of my own kids. It's not perfect, but it's honest. And for the first time in a long time, that feels like enough.